Howdy my totally as always tubular gamers, and we're back with, you guessed it, another ranking video. Thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we got a big one. Today we're ranking my top 40 games of 2023. Yeah, I know that's a pretty big number, but you see most people, they do like a top 10, maybe a top 20 if they're feeling spicy, but you see I'm doing a top 40 games of 2023. I played an absolute ton of games in 2023. I played as many new releases as I could possibly physically play, as many as one man could play. Like, I don't have some big team or a large group doing this. This is all games I played this year. I have played everything under the sun, it feels like, but there's still plenty of games I'm missing, so I will give a few honorable mentions and mention a few of the games I did not have a chance to play. And so if you feel some games might be missing, that very well might be why. Now, when it comes to my top 40 and how I'm ranking these games, this was a very difficult list to make. I loved a ton of these games. These are some of my favorite games of all time now. Like, I really loved a bunch of these games, and it felt like at times I was just splitting hairs. In fact, a majority of this list, it felt like I was splitting hairs, and I was flip-flopping back and forth and being indecisive all over the place. But for the moment, this is my order, but I can say above all else that I can recommend all 40 of these games. They're all good, they all have some merit to them, and I think they're all worth playing. The next thing worth saying is this is my list. This is my very personal curated list that I created based on my interests, my tastes, what I like, etc., etc. It's not your list, it's my list. Let me know your list down below. I would absolutely love to hear your list. I would really genuinely like to hear it, but I'm just saying, this is my list, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Speaking of commenting your list down below, let me know your favorite games you played all year. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. We got the super thanks and the Patreon going on as well. Any support is truly greatly appreciated. Like, seriously, I really do appreciate it. While 2023 was an amazing year for video games, it was one of the worst years ever for the gaming industry. There were layoffs upon layoffs, studio closures. There was over 10,000 people laid off in the game development, including myself. I was laid off from Insomniac. And so any support is appreciated. Alright, the intro's gone on long enough. I'm sorry it's been so bloated. I had a few things I wanted to say. I will provide timestamps for this video though. I usually don't do that, but this is a pretty long list. But before we get to said list, I do want to give a few honorable mentions. Yes, despite me talking about 40 games, I still have a few honorable mentions. These games just barely didn't make the list. I want to give an honorable mention to Dredge, a brilliant indie horror game that is nothing like anything else I've played. I want to give a shout out to Detective Pikachu Returns, a fun throwback to the first Detective Pikachu, and it tells an interesting enough story. Samba de Amigo Party Central is a fantastic rhythm game, and Minecraft Legends. I actually like this game. I thought it was a fun little spin-off in the Minecraft series, but yeah, these games didn't make the list. I also want to give a shout out to Lethal Company. I don't really feel right putting an early access game on a list like this, but Lethal Company is a ton of fun. And then a few games I want to mention I did not play this year, but hopefully I get to play in the future. I did not play Pizza Tower, Sea of Stars, Lies of P, Diablo 4, or Gisant. I heard great things about all of these games, and I hope to play them all in the future, but yeah, they're not on the list. I'm also not looking at re-releases here. Remakes, they're on the table, but re-releases, negative. Alright, long enough intro, let's get into it. What is number 40? Nothing says my list more than my number 40. In the number 40 spot, we have Corn Kid 64. Absolutely one of 2023's hidden gems. Corn Kid 64 is an all-new 64-bit 3D platformer starring two goat babies. It may have something to do with Stephen King, but I really doubt it. It seems to be about one of the characters having a reoccurring dream and trying to get out of it. But yeah, it is a full new 3D platformer in the style of a Nintendo 64 game. Now, I've played a few of these throwback Nintendo 64 3D platformers, but none of them seem to have hit as hard as Corn Kid 64, which really understands what made platformers so great in that era. You have a great moveset, the controls are really nice, the aesthetic absolutely hits, the music really sounds like something you'd hear from the 90s or early 2000s, and it's really impressive. The level design's solid, there's a bunch of collectibles, and then on top of that, the game is just fun. The game is not the longest, it'll only take you a few hours to beat, but if you want to collect everything in this game, you're going to be here quite a while, because the game actually really does take advantage of the moveset. You have a bunch of different moves you can use to get around the place, and some of these collectibles are going to make you do the absolute most. And this is a pretty challenging 3D platformer all around, but not only is it challenging, it's engaging. It kept me interested and I wanted to keep going because yeah, I was challenged, but I was having a fun time. If you like 3D platformers or you have some fond memories of Nintendo 64 3D platformers, you're going to like this game. You're going to like this game for the aesthetic alone. Right now it's only on Steam. Hopefully it comes to consoles sooner than later, because yeah, it's actually pretty good and totally a hidden gem that I don't see anybody and their mom talking about. And in my number 39 spot, we have Starfield. It really does pain me to have this game so low down on the list. It's one of my most disappointing games all year. The game still is good. It still has plenty of good elements, but ultimately, yeah, it really was just a disappointment. The game was billed as Bethesda's next big RPG experience that you can sink hundreds of hours into after Fallout 4 because we act like 76 doesn't exist, and I know plenty of people that have put a ton of time into this game and absolutely love it, and unfortunately, it just didn't hit with me like that. I'd much rather play Skyrim or Fallout 4 over this game. This game has plenty of good elements. I think the story is half interesting. I think the world is decent. The world building is actually pretty alright. The characters I think are solid enough. Unfortunately, the companions I'm pretty whatever about, but a lot of the characters are okay. The gunplay is certainly good. I think the gunplay is the best gunplay in any Bethesda game. The quests, while there are some good ones, unfortunately a lot of them are very samey, fetch questy, uninspired, unimaginative, and feel like they could have been an email rather than a quest. Additionally, the bounty system, it ain't so great. Exploration just straight sucks in this game. There's like nothing to find, and I just feel like the sense of exploration, you know, kind of the point of the game, just isn't there, and it was honestly better in 76. But hey, the ship builder, it really slaps. I think the ship combat's actually pretty good. Being in space, you know, it's cool to look at. Graphically, the game isn't horrible, but it runs on Bethesda's shitty engine, and there's loading screens everywhere, and I'm starting to wonder why I even included this game on the list. I did have some fun with it. I did enjoy parts of it, but ultimately, I really can only recommend this game to diehard Bethesda fans, and I feel like it's one of those games that everyone kind of has a different opinion on, and so you just kind of need to try it to form your own opinion rather than hearing what everyone else has to say. And so that was my opinion. It's number 39 for a reason. Let's move on. In the number 38 spot, we have Sonic Superstars, the brand new 2D Sonic game that came out a few months ago. Now, the general reception for this game seems to be pretty all over the place, but when is it not for a Sonic game? But I enjoyed it for what it was. I think it's a good 2D Sonic game, and it's far, far away from being one of the worst. I think this game has some good elements to it. Does it have some pretty big, glaring flaws to it? Absolutely, but I still think the game is pretty fun. I think it's a solid 2D platformer, and I did have fun in co-op. I know pretty much everybody's roasted the co-op just because it's not the most functional or smooth, especially when compared to a Mario game, but I had fun in the co-op. I played the entire game cooperatively, and I don't regret it. Are there certain areas where I think it would have been more beneficial to be by myself? Absolutely, but you can play through this game by yourself, you can play with friends, and either way, I don't think you can really go all that wrong. I like that there's 5 different playable characters, all of them with their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's cool that they all do genuinely play different from each other. And I think the level design is decently accommodating for that. I actually think the level design for the most part is pretty solid. There's plenty of alternate paths and replayability, and there's actually some themes I don't think I've really ever seen in a Sonic game that are in here. It at least felt different from most 2D Sonic games. You didn't just run through Green Hill Zone and Sandopolis again. I think the controls were decent enough, and I actually really did like the special stages. They were unique, and I'm a fan of them. Unfortunately, the boss fights in this game are just straight dog shit. I have nothing else to say about them other than that. The multiplayer outside of the co-op also sucks, but hey, at least the music's good, the game looks alright, and if you like Sonic or 2D platformers, I can recommend this game at a discount. It's a little pricey at $50, but just give it some time, you'll get it nice and cheap, and then yeah, I think it's worth playing. And in the number 37 spot, we have Horizon Chase 2, another hidden gem popping up here. We have the underrated arcade racer that is the follow-up to the original Horizon Chase Turbo. Now, the original Horizon Chase Turbo, one of my favorite arcade racers of all time. I love that game, and so once I found out that this game exists, I was all over it. I was really excited, and it does not disappoint. This is one of the best arcade racers of the entire year. This is a very fast throwback to older arcade racers such as Pole Position, complete with the scrolling background. This game, if you couldn't tell immediately, does have the scrolling background, and it looks great. This game, it feels great, it looks great, it controls incredibly well, and it is just a blast to play. I'll immediately say you have such a good sense of speed in this game. You feel so fast in this game, and you go really fast. Like, it's incredibly satisfying how fast you'll go, and you'll make a nice big turn, or you'll do a boost or pass someone up. It's a great time. You'll do plenty of races here. They all have like well over 15 or 20 other cars here, so you'll be racing a bunch of people. There's coins to collect, there's time trials, there's a few different event types, there's plenty of courses, at least a few hours of fun here. You even get to level up your cars. There's a good selection of vehicles here. I really enjoyed this game once I started playing it. I pretty much couldn't put it down until I was done with it. Is it better than the first Horizon Chase? I don't know about that one. The jury's still out on that one. The music's definitely better in the first one, but the music still slaps here. In fact, this game, it totally slaps. I highly recommend anybody who likes racing games play the PC version, though I've heard terrible things about the Switch version. And in the number 36 spot, we have Assassin's Creed Mirage, the latest in the AC series. This game really is a throwback to what made AC popular in the late 2000s and plays much more like those games rather than any of the newer modern games like Origins or Valhalla. It really is a straight stealth action game. With almost no RPG elements, the game focuses on just one city, one time period, and takes around 10 to 15 hours to beat, unlike the gargantuan modern games that take 50, 60, 70 hours to beat and just take way too long. The game focuses on Basim, a side character in Valhalla, and it's about his struggles and him getting into the Hidden Ones, which would eventually become the Brotherhood. And while I don't think he's one of the strongest protagonists in the AC series, I mean, he was decent enough. He does have some depth towards the end of the game. And then when it comes to the gameplay, it really does play very similar to Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood, where you're in a decent-sized open world and usually are given targets to take out. You gotta assassinate people. You can be stealthy. You don't have to be stealthy. You can just run in and start fighting everybody. There is hand-to-hand combat, but it kind of sucks on purpose as they don't really incentivize this. There's, again, plenty of targets to take out. Basim has plenty of people that he needs to assassinate, whether it's the main story or one of the side quests. The side quests, really the side objectives in this game, are just as bad as they were in the 2000s. But I enjoyed this game as a fun throwback to the older AC games. I can immediately say, though, this game is nowhere near as good as AC2 or Brotherhood. Those games are just way better in several different aspects. But if you're someone who doesn't like the modern Assassin's Creed games or want it to go back to how it was in the originals, this might be worth checking out. And in the number 35 spot, we have The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog. If you forgot that this game exists, I'm here to remind you this is really one of the forgotten gems of 2023. The game was released exclusively on Steam on April 1st and is about the murder of our favorite hedgehog. Sonic dies, and you really get to play detective in a whodunit story to figure out who the murderer of Sonic the Hedgehog was. Now, this game is very different from like any other Sonic game. It's actually a point-and-click adventure game where it's all about getting clues, getting witness statements, piecing everything together, and just, you know, figuring out who done it. I know it might seem crazy to have this game even this high on the list, let alone above the 2D Sonic game, but this is some of the most enjoyment or entertainment that I've ever had from a Sonic game. While the gameplay, you know, isn't really anything all that special, it's pretty basic point-and-click gameplay, and there is a little bit of platforming in these mini-games. What really sells this game is the atmosphere, the vibe, just how lovable and goofy it is, and the writing. The writing is actually really great. There's a bunch of callbacks to other Sonic games. I was laughing out loud several times. And there is so many callbacks and throwbacks to tons of other Sonic games. Like, I loved how many callbacks there were to longtime fans like myself. If you're a longtime Sonic fan and you've not tried this game, please set aside 2 or 3 hours and play through this game. You will not regret it. There is just so much love and care given to longtime Sonic fans. That and the art's nice and the music is pretty decent too. I really enjoyed it. Best April Fool's game ever. So for the number 34 spot, we have WarioWare Move It, the latest in the WarioWare series. I didn't see a ton of hype about this game, and it also came out really just during a very busy holiday season, and that's unfortunate because this is actually one of the better WarioWare games in quite some time. Now, I love the older WarioWare games, but that latest one, Get It Together, just didn't really do it for me. This game, though, seems to be a real return to form. While it isn't the longest and it doesn't have a bazillion micro games, the micro games they have here are very unique. The whole game's gimmick is actually incredibly unique and is just oozing with creativity. The game has you making certain motions or doing certain movements with the Joy-Cons to really be in a certain position, and you'll have to do the micro games based around that movement or position. It's kind of hard to explain, but seeing it on screen you totally understand, and you'll be doing some really wacky movements and putting yourself in some really awkward positions, and I just had a bunch of fun. I played through the whole game with my partner. It's not too long, but there is a couple extra modes to play after you're done with it, and I had some fun with the micro games. You know, it's only a few hours of fun and it's a half decent party game, but it is good at what it is. And if you needed a WarioWare fix for quite some time or Get It Together wasn't really for you, then this one might absolutely be for you. It's not smooth moves or the DS game, but it's still a decent WarioWare game. And in the number 33 spot, we have The Crew Motorfest, the third game in the Crew series, developed by Ubisoft, and in my opinion, this is Ubisoft's best game all year. Now, The Crew 1 and 2, I have had a little bit of fun with them, The Crew 2 especially, but I never really considered them anything more than just kind of mediocre driving games. The Crew Motorfest, though, is actually pretty good, and in my opinion, quite a bit better than The Crew 1 and 2. It does not have a recreation of America, rather it has a recreation of Oahu, an island in Hawaii. And there's this huge festival going on, and there really is a celebration of car culture. That festival is really the main reason why so many people have called this game Forza Horizon at Home, and you know, I won't lie to you, it definitely feels like they took a bunch of ideas and steps and even the interface from Forza Horizon 5 in particular, but I think it's still a pretty decent arcade racer. You're given a bunch of different events with several different types of vehicles, and they really do actually give you a history lesson on a bunch of these vehicles. You get to go pretty fast. You go through some pretty stunning vistas. Like, this game actually does look very good and is a very cool recreation of Hawaii, and the music in the game ain't half bad. When it comes to the actual driving, this is the best any Ubisoft driving game has honestly ever felt. I think it feels really nice. It's got a good sense of speed. The controls are good, and I enjoyed driving around in this game. There is boats and planes, and unfortunately, it just ain't all that great. It doesn't control all that well, and these events just aren't very exciting, but I mean, you rarely honestly go in the plane or the boat. I usually just used it to get somewhere really fast. There's also a bunch of online game modes. The Battle Royale mode is actually way more fun than I'd like to admit. Yeah, I'd actually like to put more time into it, but there's like a bajillion games to play right now, so I doubt it's going to happen. If you like racing games, I really actually think you should check this one out. I think it's an improvement over the first two games, and yeah, it was a fun time. And in the number 32 spot, we have another driving game. We have Lego 2K Drive. Now, I didn't hear much about this game pre or post-release, and that's a shame because I actually quite enjoyed this game. Now, the game was developed by Visual Concepts of WWE and NBA 2K fame, and it's very different from all the other games they've made. You really just want to be the best Lego driver in all of Lego World, I guess, and you've got plenty of rivals that don't want that to happen. I enjoyed the goofy little story for what it was. Sure, it is probably very oriented towards kids, and I'm not the target audience, but it was still lighthearted fun that felt like a Saturday morning cartoon. But when it came to the racing is actually what I really liked here. This is actually a pretty competent arcade racer. Sure, there's items and drifting like it's Mario Kart, but it does do a few things of its own, like how you can go from driving a normal vehicle to like an ATV off-roader to a boat, and you can switch totally on the fly. Other racing games like Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transform might have you switch for certain parts of the race, but here you can legit switch whenever you want on the fly, and some races involve all three vehicle types, which is very cool. I like the environments, I like how varied they are. This game has a bunch of charm and personality to it that really reminds me of the Lego games from the 90s rather than anything we usually get nowadays. What's cool is you also get to completely explore around these environments, do side missions, get collectibles. Of course, there's online racing, and the campaign's got a decent length to it, 8 to 10 hours. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Unfortunately, the game was priced at $70, which seemed really steep, and nowadays it's well under half of that. And so I can easily say nowadays, if you like driving games, if you like Lego, go check this out. It's actually pretty fun. And then just making it out of the top 30 in the number 31 spot, we have Like a Dragon Gaiden. For the one person who's still not with the times, the Like a Dragon series was formerly known as the Yakuza series, and this new game isn't really a main game, it's more of a side game that explains what Kiryu was doing in between the ending of Yakuza 6 all the way up until Like a Dragon 8 Infinite Wealth. Now, originally this game was actually going to just be a DLC, but eventually became its own main game, and you can kind of see that originally it was going to be a DLC, as it's one of the smallest Like a Dragon games of them all, taking only around 8 to 10 hours to finish unless you do a bunch of the side content. But I still enjoyed this game for what it was. It's not a Modern Warfare 3 situation where it's this tiny little campaign that sucks and has reused assets. No, this game is much better than that. The combat is real time. You're beating the piss out of people like the older games. Kiryu does have a new style here and some new gadgets to help him out, and I actually think these are pretty cool. I enjoyed the combat for what it was. The open world is Sotenbori from Yakuza 2, 5, and several other games, and it's a decent open world. It was good then, it's good now, there's plenty to see. The side missions, I don't know about them in this game. I don't really care much for them. They're not all that great outside of the Judgment one, in my opinion. And I would say that this is some of the weakest side content that the series has ever seen. The story itself, also, I'm a bit mixed on. I just don't like certain aspects of it, but I mean, it's okay. It does have a pretty strong emotional ending, so I will give it that. But at least there's some pretty cool boss fights, some decent set pieces, and it does provide more clarity around Yakuza 7 and what the hell Kiryu's exactly doing. So that's cool, but all this game really honestly did was just hype me up for Infinite Wealth. I'm really excited for that game, and this game, while I think it is good, it is certainly not one of the very best of the Like a Dragon series. It's not even the best Like a Dragon game you'll see on this list, but it's solid. And in the number 30 spot, we have Dragon Quest Monsters: The Dark Prince. This is the third video in a row I'm talking about this game, so I'll keep it brief. This game is a spin-off in the Dragon Quest series taking place before Dragon Quest IV, starring the main antagonist, the Dark Prince. He's cursed by his father at the beginning of the game and cannot injure or hurt any of the monsters, and so he becomes a monster tamer to try to take his place back. It takes place in Dragon Quest IV's world. You see Dragon Quest IV characters, and it's really cool that they recreated everything in 3D. If you couldn't tell by now, the presentation is very weak in this game and the frame rate is suspicious, but I assure you, if you're able to look past the presentation not being above a PS2 game, what you have is a really solid RPG. The game very much plays like a normal mainline Dragon Quest game, where instead of your party members, you have monsters. You'll get the monsters to join you by, hitting them over and over, or maybe they'll want to join you after the battle. There's over 300 or 400 different monsters. Like, there's just a ton of monsters, and you'll want to get as many as you can because it's actually really fun to get new monsters and synthesize other ones, and you'll do battle with plenty of other monsters or other monster tamers. You'll explore these worlds that actually do change in real time depending on the season, which is a really cool mechanic. And there really is a bunch to see here. This game is way bigger than I expected it to be, taking well over 40 or 50 hours. And if you want to get all the monsters, I don't know how long it's going to take you to beat this game, but I really enjoyed this game. It feels like a mainline Dragon Quest game. It really is as close to a mainline game as it gets, and I was really craving some Dragon Quest, and that's why this game is where it's at on the list. It's one of the best Dragon Quest spin-offs, and if you like Dragon Quest at all, this really is a must-play. And in the number 29 spot, we have a game I've not yet talked about on the channel, and that is Persona 5 Tactica. I plan on talking about this game very soon, though, very soon. So this game is a spin-off to Persona 5, and it actually takes place after Persona 5. Does it take place after the Royal Strikers? Who knows? It takes place after Persona 5 and sees all of our favorite characters coming together to fight a new enemy force, and that's all I'm going to say for the story. I actually quite enjoyed the story of this game. It is different from Persona 5 and Strikers, and it was a unique tale. Look, I know some of y'all are real sick of the Persona 5 world and characters, but I'm not. I love these characters, some of my favorite characters in any JRPG, and they're great here. When it comes to the gameplay, this game is very different from any other Persona game. It is a turn-based tactical strategy game. I think the best comparison I could make is Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and the best comparison I can make for that game is XCOM. So if you like XCOM or Mario plus Rabbids, think of that, but with Persona. They throw in a bunch of different SMT elements like criticals, one mores, and even doing the all-out attack. I think it's actually really well implemented. I enjoy the gameplay of this game. I actually really enjoy the gameplay, much more than I ever expected I would. The beginning was a little slow, but once everything finally clicked and I got all the party members and really found out what each party member did, it came together, and this was some of the most fun I've had with any tactical game in quite some time. On top of that, the game has a very unique chibi look, and of course it's got the Persona 5 art style, a little bit of the music from the main game, but a bunch of original music that of course slaps. The voice acting is great, the presentation is actually pretty solid, and yeah, while I wouldn't say it's as good as the latest Mario plus Rabbids, I'd still say it's actually very much worth playing if you like Persona, especially if you like Persona 5, or you like these kinds of games. If you like XCOM, you're gonna like this game. Is it the most difficult or challenging or engaging? No, but it's still a fun time. I would say this is one of the best Persona spin-offs of them all, and there's a lot of spin-offs in this series. And in the number 28 spot, we have Warhammer 40k Boltgun. Now, the Warhammer 40k series is pretty awesome. I like it. There's a bunch of great games in this franchise, especially strategy games, but when it comes to really good shooters, 40k doesn't really have that many. This game, though, is the absolute exception. This is like the best shooter of the entire Warhammer 40k series. Like, this game absolutely slaps and is one of the best boomer shooters I've played all year. While I might have given Slayer's X the spot in the Hidden Gems video, this game is not getting talked enough about outside of first-person shooter circles. Like, this game just absolutely kicks some serious ass and really understands what it's like to be a space marine. Like, you absolutely fuck shit up in this game. You're a space marine sent down to this shithole planet and told to purge it of basically everything. You'll kill everything that moves in this game in one of the most satisfying first-person shooters I've played in quite some time. You're given some really awesome weapons that are very true to form for Warhammer and feel incredibly powerful, and you'll just blow everything up. Like, I cannot express to you how satisfying the gunplay feels in this game, how the whole screen shaking, you're super heavy, you're just destroying everything. You got an awesome melee weapon, the chainsaw sword, you just rip everything up, it's great. great. When it comes to the level design, very similar to Duke Nukem 3D where you got to get keys. Really what the gameplay amounts to is shoot everything, find key, shoot everything, boss fight, shoot everything, and that's the whole game, and it's damn good fun. I like the retro aesthetic. The music's good, and if you like first-person shooters, this is not one to skip. It is a ton of fun, especially if you love old-school first-person shooters. This is a good one. So for number 27, we got Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl 2. Now, All-Star Brawl 1, well, I thought it was a decent to good platform fighter. It didn't really have the longevity I was hoping for. Hopefully, All-Star 2 absolutely has that, because this game really is a big improvement on the first game in several aspects. And what you have here is, in my opinion, the best alternate platform fighter on the market these days. I'd much rather play this game than Multiverses. And I assure you, it's not just some licensed garbage kids game. It really actually is better than that. This game is a really solid platform fighter with a ton of depth and mechanics. Seriously, the depth kind of goes crazy in this game. Like, they really wanted this game to be very viable competitively, and they wanted it to have that tournament scene, and the amount of depth this game has, I totally could see it. The roster is pretty solid also. It's very different from the first game, and in my opinion, the first game might have a slightly better roster, but it's still cool here. But what makes this roster is how much fan service there really is for these characters, especially some of these characters that have not been seen in eons, like a long time, and they really reference a bunch of episodes, movies, and just memes. Like, I really liked how much fan service there was and just how all the characters felt. I loved how different all their moves were. They all play very differently from each other, and yeah, I thought it was a ton of fun. There's actually a pretty cool single player mode that's like a roguelike, and then of course you got your multiplayer fun. I've had some fun with this game in multiplayer. I'm hoping to have more in the future, and I hope this game sticks. I really do. Sure, it does have a pretty budget presentation, but it plays nice, it feels nice, it's incredibly satisfying. There is, again, depth. There's a bunch of different characters here, and if you like Nickelodeon and haven't tried this, I really advise it. It's already like almost dirt cheap anyway, so hopefully, I'm really fingers crossed here it sticks. In the 26th spot, we have Forza Motorsport, also known as Forza 8. And this is actually the very first Forza game I'm talking about on the channel, and it was the first Forza Motorsport game I've played in quite some time. I've had some fun with the Horizon games over the last couple years, but mainline Forza Motorsport, no, it's been quite a while since I played any of these, and I quite enjoyed this game. While I'm not the biggest sim racer guy, I could still enjoy what this game had. I know a lot of people have been dunking on this game for a variety of reasons, and not liking the car selection, or the online sucks, or this or that. I still did enjoy the game. I played through the campaign, and while I do think it does take a little too long and some of the races take forever and I don't want to do a practice race, please stop, I actually did enjoy this game. I think the racing is fun. I like how the cars feel. There's a ton, and I mean a ton of customization to how this game plays, whether if you want it as sim as possible or make it almost an arcade racer. I love the level of customization you have over literally everything. I like how accessible the game is. Basically anybody, and I truly mean anybody on this planet could play this game, which I think is really cool. I mean, the fact that a blind person, literal blind person, could play this game and do well, it's pretty amazing. This game also looks pretty amazing, from the tracks to the weather to the cars to the interiors. I think this game looks amazing. It feels really great, and I just thought it was a chill game that I could play a few hours at a time that I played for the last 2 or 3 months. Do I think it's better than the latest Gran Turismo? I don't know about that. I actually really like GT7's career mode. I don't like the microtransactions in that game, but the online mode is probably better in the new Forza. I don't know. I haven't played enough of it to really judge. Either way, I like this game. I enjoyed it for what it was. Maybe that's a hot take, but I thought it was a pretty solid driving game. So in the number 25 spot, we have My Friendly Neighborhood. I've talked about this game a few times, but I'll briefly talk about it again. The gist is pretty simple. You're an electrician and you go to this old television studio that's randomly emitting some kind of signal and messing up, you know, real television. It also turns out that this old studio is full of a bunch of wannabe Muppets. They had their own show and everything, but it was shut down. You get there and all of a sudden the Muppets are alive and they're trying to attack you, and you're just trying to shut the signal down, and I'll just leave it at that. This is a full-on survival horror game. There really is a loving homage to survival horror as a genre, especially Resident Evil. You know, a lot of people look at FNAF and Poppy Playtime and laugh and say those aren't even horror games. This game is very much a survival horror game, complete with resource management, puzzles, exploration, going back and forth, backtracking, combat, getting keys, and of course plenty of scares. This is a scary game. It scared me several times. I'm sure a ton of people are going to look at this and laugh and go, you're really telling me these little puppets actually scared you? Yeah, this game got me plenty of times, whether it was just the jump scares or the tension that it builds up. This is a decently scary game. It's also very indie. It was made by a few people. and I think it's incredibly impressive. The presentation is solid, and the game has a good soundtrack as well, especially the save music. You know, they really actually did capture that Resident Evil vibe, and I brought up Resident Evil a few times. What do you mean by that? It really does pay homage, like how you're managing your inventory, the resources. Like, you even have to manage the box. That's how much of an homage it is, but this game has a few unique twists of its own that I don't want to spoil. I've said it once, I've said it twice, I'll say it again. This is one of the best horror games of the entire year. You do not want to miss this if you're a fan of the genre. Unfortunately, it's still only on PC, but I'm hoping it comes to consoles in 2024 because it's actually a really great survival horror game that you shouldn't miss. And in the number 24 spot, we have Wolong Fallen Dynasty. A lot of people forgot this game even came out in 2023, but I didn't. I enjoyed this game. I love their previous games, Neo 1 and 2. Those are some of the best Souls-likes you could play. And I think Wolong, while not as good as, say, Neo 2, is still a pretty good game, taking place in Chinese mythology rather than Japanese mythology. It sees our character going through Chinese history, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. Of course, there's a bunch of supernatural elements, other people getting involved, etc., etc. Some real-life figures do show up, my man Lu Bu does. And if you've ever played any of the Dynasty Warrior games, some of these characters, some of these icons, some of these legends might actually feel pretty familiar to you. So that was kind of cool, but the story was certainly one of the weakest parts of this game. What isn't one of the weakest parts of this game is the combat. The combat really makes or breaks games like these, and the combat is very good in this game. It is very parry-centric. In fact, if you can't parry in this game, yeah, you're just not going to have a very good time. When I started, I wasn't the best, but by the end of it, I truly did get good because parrying is absolutely the key to every combat encounter. You want to parry as much as you can and then just slice and dice your way. And it becomes incredibly rewarding and satisfying to just parry the crap out of someone and then just annihilate them. Like, the combat is actually quite satisfying in this game. I'd say this game is the closest game we've ever had to Sekiro. Like, the sword combat is the closest we've ever had to Sekiro, and while at the same time it really isn't that much like it, it is similar in many ways, especially with the parry mechanics and how relentless you and the enemies can be. But it's nice to play a game that at least tries to kind of be like Sekiro, because that sword combat is just unmatched in that game. I won't lie to you, after I beat this game though, I went and played Sekiro and went, yeah, that game's a lot better than this, with better level design and no stupid loot mechanics. But if you like Souls-likes, if you like the Team Ninja Souls-likes in particular, I think Wolong is totally worth playing. It's still on Game Pass. I'd much rather play this game than some of the other Souls-likes that came out this year, like Lords of the Fallen. It's a good game. So for number 23, we have Star Ocean: The Second Story R. Now, I never played the original. I went in totally blind here. I've never really dabbled in the Star Ocean series outside of that latest one, and I actually enjoyed this game. I thought it was pretty great in several different aspects. Obviously, the presentation is the first thing you see. This is a beautiful game. I love how it looks. I hope more PS1 or Super Nintendo games get remade in this style, as it really does look great. It sounds great also. The music is really kick-ass, and you can switch between the original or the new rendition. But what even is this game? It is an action RPG. It is a classic action RPG that was lovingly remade, and it has actually a lot going for it. You can play as two different characters, so there's basically two different campaigns. Like, you get completely different campaigns at several instances. So to get the full story, you really will want to play through the game twice. But what even is the story? It's basically about someone from what would be the future coming to this planet full of savages. Okay, they're not savages, they just don't have as much technology, and I'll just leave it at that. The story is actually very interesting, and it has some really likable characters. The characters really make this game's story. They're pretty great. The combat is also really solid. Like I mentioned, it is an action RPG, and you'll be doing a bunch of button mashing. You'll beat the crap out of plenty of things, and you also have a ton of spells and special moves. You can chain things together, and then there's a bunch of RPG elements thrown in there as well. This game actually has quite a bit going on under the hood. There's a number of systems here, whether it's the crafting, whether it's leveling everything up and putting your points into everything. Like, there's more going on here than you think, and for a PS1 game, I'm not gonna lie, it was a little ahead of its time, and it's cool to see even nowadays. And then there's actually a fair amount of replayability. Like, you can't get every party member in each run. You have to pick and choose, and I can see why so many people loved this game back when it was on the PS1. It was the fan favorite for a reason. It was great then, and it's even better now. This is easily the definitive version that smokes the original, and I have no problem recommending it to people who like action RPGs, or really just RPGs in general. I quite enjoyed my time with it, and I think you will as well. And in the number 22 spot, we have Mortal Kombat 1, the latest in the long-running Mortal Kombat series. This game really continues off where 11's DLC left off, with a totally new timeline, with characters being different, having different origin stories. Really what this is just kind of like a soft reboot. Now, Mortal Kombat 1, out of all the fighting games I played this year, this one is certainly one of my favorites. Not only does it look amazing, like seriously, this game looks incredible, one of the best looking fighting games ever made, but it also plays pretty well also. I wasn't really huge on how MK11 played. I thought it was just a little too slow, and this game really actually improves some of my issues with 11. It's a lot faster. They kind of went back to basics and reworked a ton of the characters, and yeah, I don't really have much to complain about. I had a ton of fun here. I think this is the best that the combat's been since X. Like, it was enjoyable, whether you're getting your ass whooped online, you're fighting in the story mode, or doing classic towers. I think the combat is very good. I like how there's different modes here. The story mode, while it is only like 8-ish hours, I did enjoy the story. I like where it goes. This is the most invested I've been in the Mortal Kombat story in quite some time. I like the antagonist. I like the main characters. I like how it ends. And I think it's one of the best uses I've ever seen of a multiverse in really any media. They actually fully take advantage of it, and I thought it was very cool. The story mode's great, the combat's great, the presentation's great. What isn't so great with this game? All the microtransactions, the combat. While it is good, I don't know if it's as good as other Mortal Kombat games, and I don't know what kind of longevity this game is going to have, and also I don't like the seasonal invasion mode where you move around the map. It was just a little too grindy for me, and I didn't really have much fun with it. But if you're someone who hasn't played Mortal Kombat in a long time, maybe you've never tried Mortal Kombat, this is the one to try. I think it is good. It's the best Mortal Kombat's been in quite some time, and despite its flaws, I think this is still a very solid fighting game. So for number 21, we have one of the most pleasant surprises of the entire year, and that is Dead Island 2. I fully expected this game to be a pile of crap after being in development hell for so long, and yeah, it actually wasn't. Not only is this the best of the Dead Island series, but it was a pretty fun throwback to games from like the 360 era. At least it felt kind of like that, and I truly do mean in the best ways. The game was not super bloated or overly long. There's no live service nonsense. Like, it was just straight and to the point, and I can appreciate that. I know plenty of people didn't really care all that much for this game, but I had a blast with it. Taking place in LA and a zombie apocalypse happening, it's up to your characters to just try to get the hell out of there. There's some fun throwbacks to the original Dead Island, but you don't need to have played the original to really understand this, and the story is, well, to be honest, as bad as the other Dead Island games. It's incredibly generic, and every zombie trope you could ever possibly think of, it's like right here in the story. It's nothing special. What makes this game special is the combat and really just the general gameplay. It's actually incredibly similar to the original Dead Islands. Obviously, it feels a lot better, and the melee combat is just straight up a lot better than the originals, but it still is that same kind of atmosphere, vibe, and again, just feeling to it. Like, the game is not open world. You go to some open areas, but the game is not open worlds by any means. There are some side missions, but it is a pretty linear game for the most part, and you just beat the crap out of some zombies. Help some people, don't help some people if you don't want to do the side missions. There's some crafting and RPG elements, but it is very, and I mean very basic and surface level here, and it's really easy to wrap your head around. In fact, the whole gameplay is. It's kind of scary how similar the gameplay loop is to the original Dead Island. Not all that much has changed here, and I can appreciate that. Not every game has to be this massive open world game that adheres to all modern game standards. We can get something different like this, and yeah, it does feel retro in certain aspects. It's a great bargain bin game. The whole game is co-op, and I think it's better than what people gave it credit for. And in the number 20 spot, we have SpongeBob SquarePants and the Cosmic Shake. I'm sure plenty of you are rolling your eyes right now and going, lol, what a little kid. How could he say this game is that good? Well, I actually do think it is that good, and I'm not afraid to admit it. SpongeBob is like my favorite show ever. Have always loved it, and this is one of the most enjoyable experiences I've had this year. It's certainly one of the funniest as a longtime SpongeBob fan. The game sees SpongeBob going to several different time periods to save his friends after some stuff goes awry, and the game really is like the spiritual successor to Battle for Bikini Bottom. Of course, there was the movie game, but this really is more like Battle for Bikini Bottom than that game. And really, this is kind of the follow-up I wanted for seemingly my entire life, the real follow-up to Battle for Bikini Bottom, where you get dropped into these kind of open areas and are told to go collect things. Sure, it's not the most inspired game design, but it absolutely works. You go through a ton of different levels collecting different things. There's platforming challenges, there's a little bit of combat, there's mini games, a bunch of, and I truly mean a bunch of SpongeBob references. And you wrap it up in a nice 8 to 10 hour bow, maybe a little longer if you want to get everything. Sure, it doesn't have the craziest graphics or the most engaging gameplay, and it's certainly not challenging and sometimes not all that rewarding, but it's fun. It's simplistic in a good way. It's not overly complicated. It's not bogged down by a bunch of game mechanics. It knows what it wants to be, and it's that. The game feels and plays like this forgotten SpongeBob platformer from the 2000s that nobody knew existed until now, and that's totally fine with me. That's all I ever wanted. Very similarly to Dead Island, we don't need every game to follow all the modern trends. We can have fun throwbacks like this and still enjoy them. And I enjoyed this game way more than I enjoyed a bunch of other games this year. I'm not afraid to admit it. And I think anybody that likes platformers, SpongeBob, or maybe is looking for a 2000s fix, this is the game for you. It's dirt cheap nowadays because of course it's going to be dirt cheap. It's a SpongeBob game, but it really should not be missed. It's quite possibly the best SpongeBob game ever made, and that really is saying a lot, trust me. So for number 19, we have Amnesia: The Bunker. I've talked about this game a couple times now, but I'll briefly talk about it here again. How many times have I said that in the video? It's almost like I talk about games for a living. Well, I don't, at least not yet. But Amnesia: The Bunker, one of the best horror games of the entire year. In my opinion, the scariest game of 2023. Like, this game is absolutely terrifying. Taking place during World War I, it sees your character trapped in a bunker with some kind of creature that's out to get you. It's like they took Alien Isolation, crammed it into 5 hours, put it on crack, and made this really depressing, dark, tense game that really sees you just trying not to shit in your seat from how scary it gets, especially with the inventory management. This game is not messing around with inventory management, and it kept things very, and I truly do mean very intense. This is, in my opinion, the scariest of the Amnesia games. It's the most involved with the gameplay. You even do get a gun and can kind of fight back, and yeah, I just thoroughly enjoyed it. This game really sat with me. It was paced incredibly well, and it's very replayable. It truly is a terrifying game that I feel like not enough people are talking about. Despite it being in the Amnesia series, it still feels a little underrated. That and the presentation looks amazing for being what is basically a horror indie game. Like, check this one out, especially for fans of the genre. If you haven't by this point, you're really missing out. And in the number 18 spot, we have Hot Wheels Unleashed 2, my favorite driving game of the year. I'm sure you're also rolling your eyes at this one, but hear me out for a second. I love arcade racers. I've always preferred arcade versus sim, and I love Hot Wheels. I love the first Unleashed. In this game, it really is more of the same, but even better. This game perfectly captures the vibe, the aesthetic of a kid playing with his toys, setting up some tracks around the house and having his cars race each other. Of course, there is like a story mode with like cutscenes and characters and all that, but I'd rather act like that doesn't exist. It's just a kid playing with his Hot Wheels, and sometimes some big monsters show up or whatever. I love this game's aesthetic, how it looks, and it runs super smoothly as well. And then when it comes to the racing, oh, it's great. It's the first game's, but even better. Very arcade racer, complete with drifting and boosting. You can now jump, and the jumping feels nice. And yeah, it's just a total blast to play. I didn't expect it to feel somehow even better than the first games, but yeah, it feels even better. There's a bunch of different cars. There's plenty of tracks, new areas you'll go into, like you actually get to go outside. And let me just talk about the cars for a second. Now, the first game had a good amount of cars. This game has even more vehicles. There's so many vehicles here. There's even bikes. I like how the bikes feel. I know that's not for everybody, but I enjoy the bikes. I like how many vehicles are here. I like that the loot boxes from the first game are gone. Sure, there's plenty of other DLC, and I'm sure there'll be a ton of DLC in the future, but it's better than the loot boxes. Of course, being Hot Wheels, there's a track builder. You can build your own custom tracks and download them. There's online multiplayer, and what you have here really is the best Hot Wheels game of them all. There's been some good ones in the past, but none of them really stack up compared to this game. I can really recommend this game to anybody who likes arcade racers. It seems a lot of people forgot this game even came out or didn't realize it, and that's what happens when you release your game the same day as Mario Wonder and Spider-Man 2. Why they did that? Your guess truly is as good as mine, but don't skip this one. It's my favorite racing game of the year. There was plenty of good racing games this year, but none of them really match this game in terms of entertainment and enjoyment, at least to me personally. I recommend this game and think anybody who likes driving games will get something out of it. So for number 17, we have the Dead Space remake. Now, Dead Space isn't actually that old of a game. Whether it needed a remake or not really is, I guess, an irrelevant question at this point, since, yeah, we have a full-on remake, and the game is incredibly faithful to the original Dead Space. They've just really improved the graphics to make this a very stunning game. They've touched up the controls a little, a few sections have been improved, and Isaac can now talk. In fact, I would say the storytelling is a little bit better than the original games, just from the fact that Isaac can actually speak and some of the characters are given more character here. If you're unaware of the story of Dead Space, it sees our man Isaac Clarke, just a technician, going on to this ship that has seemingly lost all power to see what's going on, and it turns out something terrible, truly terrible happened there. It was a great original premise back in the day, and it's still a great premise nowadays. It's an incredibly original premise for a horror game, and it's probably the scariest game to ever take place in space. This or Alien Isolation. I always thought the first Dead Space was the scariest of them all, and this game, yeah, it's even scarier. There's plenty of different times where the xenomorphs jump out at you, and it does get quite tense. The combat is very good, and it's still incredibly original, where you have to shoot limbs off. The gunplay and general feel of this game is great. It's somehow even better than the originals, and I love exploring the ship. Of course, you can have it just tell you where you're supposed to go, but I've always had a lot of fun really exploring and finding everything, searching all the nooks and crannies. I think the level design of the ship is great, and the parts where you leave the ship are truly chilling, like actually chilling. It gets really scary and tense, and just having no sound because you're in outer space, man, that truly is the stuff of nightmares. Look, I don't personally think the original game needed to be remade, as it's aged incredibly well, but this new version is even better than the original. I'd say this is probably the best Dead Space game. If you like survival horror games, if you like the original Dead Space, you're gonna like this game. It's also on the Game Pass or EA Play or whatever thing you're subscribed to, so if you haven't played it at this point and you like horror games, I think it's worth playing, especially at its current price. And at number 16, we have Armored Core 6, From Software's latest title that has nothing to do with Elden Ring or Dark Souls. They actually went back to their old series Armored Core, and I think that's pretty awesome. I was never really all that big on the older Armored Core games. This was really the first one that I got super into, and yeah, I thought it was pretty fun. I don't really play many mech games. This was probably the first mech related game I've played in years outside of Trails of Cold Steel, so it was very cool to have that experience. When it comes to the story and premise, it's pretty simple. You just go to this planet, you're known as 626, and you're sent to investigate, but obviously more and more happens. While I wasn't huge on the narrative, especially the storytelling, I can appreciate the world building that this game has, and it very much reminds me of Dark Souls. When it comes to the gameplay, it really is just a full-on action, third-person shooter where you're jumping around, you're flying around, you've got plenty of guns and missile launchers, you're just blowing shit up, and that really is the whole game. There's tons upon tons of weapons and parts for your mech. You really, and I mean really, get to customize every aspect of your mech, from the body to the arms to the legs to the weight to the weapons. I mean every single aspect, and you're sent into these missions to go destroy everything usually. Now, what's really great is not one mech works for everything. You will have to change up your strategy, try different weapons, try different builds because of how these missions are set up. They really incentivize you to just try everything. Like, you can buy weapons and you can sell them back for the same price. There's really no penalty to selling or buying over and over weapons. Like, you can just try whatever you want, and some builds work, some don't. It's up to you to find out, and depending on the mission, you might get totally different results. And the most fun I had with this game was just trying all the weapons and builds and getting these crazy wild mechs that could just blow shit up. And you know, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. The game is decently challenging. It's certainly not for people who only love Dark Souls and games like Dark Souls, but I think it's cool From Software's doing something that isn't Souls related. And I hope the Armored Core series continues after this, because this game, yeah, it was a ton of fun. It really was. So for number 15, we have Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Now, the first thing I want to say is I played this game on PS5 at launch, and yeah, had plenty of technical issues. Whether those issues exist now or not, I'm not really sure, but my experience was one with many frame rate drops. However, looking past the shoddy presentation, Star Wars Jedi Survivor is the best Star Wars game in quite some time. Now, I really liked Fallen Order. That was the best Star Wars game in like a decade, and this game really does improve on it. Not by a lot, but it does improve on Fallen Order, continuing the story of Cal Kestis. Cal is really one of the best Star Wars characters in quite some time. He's actually likable, and I like where his story goes. I will admit the pacing of the story isn't amazing, but I still generally enjoyed the story for what it was. I certainly enjoyed it more than any Star Wars movie in the last decade. And when it comes to the gameplay, they really try to improve on what they had in Fallen Order. Not only is Cal doing a lot more movement-wise, but he has more lightsabers than ever before. You really have a couple different stances here and can go absolutely nuts with the lightsaber, whether you want a gun to accompany you, whether you want a big old lightsaber, maybe you want a dual-wield lightsabers. You got plenty of options here, and I like how many different combat options there are. And as for the combat itself, yeah, it basically is a Souls-like. There's several Souls-like elements, but I actually really enjoyed the combat. I thought it was very engaging. I think the platforming is also really well done. The movement is really solid and it feels great, especially the fact that you can just double jump from the beginning. Like, that changes the game seriously. That really changes the level design and the worlds. And speaking of, you actually have an open world to explore. There's a couple different planets you go to. I like the level design. I like the open world. I like the side content. The side characters are really great. There's a bunch of secrets, nooks and crannies. There's quite a bit of content to this game. And if you like Star Wars and haven't played this game, I don't know what you're waiting for. Now's the perfect time to get in. Hopefully they fix the performance and the bugs. If they had fixed that beforehand when I played it, this game probably would have been higher on the list, but as it stands, here it is, and it's probably the thing I've enjoyed the most from Star Wars in quite a while. And at number 14, we have really the biggest surprise of the entire year, RoboCop Rogue City. If you had told me 12 months ago that not only your favorite first-person shooter, but one of your favorite games, top 20 games of 2023 would be a RoboCop game, I'd probably laugh at you. But here we are, RoboCop Rogue City. This game is the real deal. Like, I don't even love RoboCop, and I can appreciate what this game is doing. That first movie's pretty great. Everything else, I don't know. This game takes place after the second one and really tells its own RoboCop story and pays a ton of fan service to the original movie and sees Alex Murphy, RoboCop, protecting Detroit from some new criminals. The story was kind of whatever, but again, the fan service was quite good. What this game really excels at is the gunplay. The gunplay is so good in this game. It absolutely understood the assignment to create one of the most satisfying first-person shooters ever made. This game is violent, it is gory, it is bloody, it is heavy. Like, the gunplay is fantastic. All of the weapons feel great, they look great, and the way that you kill people in this game, it is so great. People just blow into chunks, like, you just destroy everyone. It's so visceral. I love it. I know it might sound a little morbid, but the gunplay really is that great. It's just incredibly satisfying, and it makes this game as fun as it is. The gunplay single-handedly sells the game. You do get some abilities to help you along the way, and these are just little bonuses. On top of that, though, this game is not just a straightforward shooter. There is actually open areas to explore. There's side quests. You actually get to level up and allocate skill points. You actually get to make some decisions that will influence the rest of the game, including the ending. There's a lot more here than what you would think. There's a bunch of different areas and they all look great. The game runs on Unreal Engine 5, and for being a AA game, this game looks amazing. It runs really great, and it was just so much fun. I really couldn't put it down once I started playing it. Just did not expect it to be this good, and I have no problem saying go check it out if you like shooters. Like, this one is not to be missed. So for number 13, we have Alan Wake 2. I know it might be a little surprising it's number 13 and not a lot higher. And you know, in most years, this game probably would have been in my top 10, maybe even top 5. But 2023 was really just that great of a year. Alan Wake 2 really feels like a culmination for Remedy Entertainment, a culmination of all the other games they made, all their experience to make this just unforgettable, incredibly different kind of AAA game. Like, this game is very out there, it is weird, and it has some of the craziest visuals you will ever see in a video game. It's crazy that this game even exists. Like, Alan Wake 1 came out in 2010, and that was kind of their best game, at least in my opinion, and this game really takes the cake. It's their weirdest, spookiest, scariest, most intriguing game that they've made, and it's one of the most, if not the most unique experience I've had in all of 2023. Like, I don't even want to say anything on the story because it's just that good, and I think it needs to be experienced. It's incredibly intriguing. You want to see what happens, and while it is very slow paced, it's a very good slow burn that has a lot of payoff outside of the ending. Like, this game really kept me on the edge of my seat throughout, and I just wanted to see what would happen next. And when it comes to the gameplay, you're dropped into these semi-open areas and really told to just go somewhere and investigate something. When you're Saga, you are investigating a murder or maybe some suspects, and when you're Alan, you're stuck in the dark place. Really is just trying to figure out where he's going to go next and how to get out of the dark place. I think the gameplay is quite good. It is a much slower paced game than the first one. You know, a lot of it is investigations and not so much combat, but I think the combat, when it does show up, it is good, it is satisfying, the gunplay is pretty good. I can see why some people might not be a fan of it, especially if they love the first one, as it is, again, very slow paced, and I wouldn't say this game is the most replayable, but I really enjoyed my experience. On top of that, the game looks amazing and just has so many crazy visual elements going on that there really is nothing else like it. Oh, and the actors are just fantastic. Like, all of them are really well done. Alan Wake 2, I can't recommend it to absolutely everybody. It's clearly not for everybody, but I think the people that like it really like it. I myself really did enjoy it, and I wish it could have been higher on this list, but these other games, man, they just really kick some ass. And in the number 12 spot, we have Hi-Fi Rush, the shadow-dropped Xbox darling developed by Tango Gameworks that everybody fell in love with for a little bit. And yeah, all these months later, Hi-Fi Rush totally still slaps. It really is one of the best action games of the entire year. Hopefully in the future, I'll get to talk about Hi-Fi Rush with a little bit more depth, but for now, I'll just say while it looks like a normal hack and slash with a heavy and light attack, this game actually is a lot more. It's very, very music-centric, where the whole game actually is moving to a beat. There's a ton of different songs. Music is everywhere. This game is very alive and just has a vibe and aesthetic that I've never seen before, and the beat really does carry over to the combat, where you want to stay in beat for all of the combat. There's a bunch of parrying here, there's dodging, and man, this game has a rhythm, a flow to it that like no other game has ever been able to capture. There's been other games that you play to a beat, but none of them have ever felt like this. They don't feel as good, and I just felt so in sync with this game. You know, it didn't click immediately, but after like 2 or 3 hours, yeah, it really clicked, and it was a fun time, and I didn't play anything else. There's some platforming, a little bit of exploration, and some other mini games thrown in there to really just create one of the most well-rounded, enjoyable experiences of 2023. On top of that, Chai's incredibly likable. All the characters are actually likable. The story's great about him being a defect and going up against an evil corporation, making some friends along the way, and then of course visually, I mean, you can look at it and you know how unique it looks. Seriously, this game is actually great and is probably Xbox's biggest win in 2023. This is the best Xbox game I've played in quite some time. This is probably the best Xbox Series X game outside of Forza, and this game, at least in my opinion, really actually is a system seller. It's one of the few system sellers that Xbox has, and it's really good. I think anybody who has an Xbox or a PC that can run it and has Game Pass should check it out, especially if you like rhythm-based games. You're gonna enjoy what this game has to offer. It's a good time. And in the number 11 spot, we have Super Mario RPG. Now, Super Mario RPG, at least the original game, is truly one of my favorite Mario RPGs, maybe my favorite Super Nintendo game of all time, and is just an absolute classic. And so when they announced they were remaking it, I was super hype. I did not see this one coming. Like, I really thought this game was just gone, especially because of the whole thing with Square and Nintendo. But here we are. The game is a full remake, and it's glorious. It's absolutely glorious. I mean, just look at it. It looks beautiful. They absolutely captured that original aesthetic and put it, you know, into modern graphics, and I think it just looks amazing. I love how this game looks, and then how it plays. Ooh, it's even better than the original. This is one of those remakes that straight up makes the original irrelevant. Like, it's just that good. They retained everything you know and love from the original, and even added a few extra things here. The combat, it's even faster. It's better than it ever was. It's still engaging, not the most challenging, but it's still engaging, and it's just so much fun. There's never really been another Mario RPG anything like this game. Paper Mario's great and all, but none of the Mario RPGs have ever been like this game. They've never been as original or creative or out there as this game. Seriously, this game is so creative, especially when you compare it to so many other Mario games. This game just goes way into left field, and I love it. I love the story, the characters, especially the party members. They're all so great and lovable. The combat is smooth, it's nice, it's fun, it's different. The soundtrack is truly phenomenal. You can have the original soundtrack or the new one. Either way, you're going to be winning and grinning, because this is just one for the ages, man. Super Mario RPG, it was fantastic then. I loved it as a kid, and I love it now. This really is the perfect remake. Like, I don't have anything else to say about it. It's the perfect remake that should be played by anybody who likes RPGs, Mario, or the original. And here we are, like an hour in, we're finally at the top 10 with Like a Dragon Ishin in my number 10 spot. Now, I know this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I absolutely fell in love with this game. I truly never thought this game was ever going to come to the West, and I was never going to play it, but it got announced it was coming to the West. I finally played it and was like, gosh dang, this was a real good game. This one really stuck with me, and it truly is one of my favorite Like a Dragon games. I love this franchise to death. I'm super excited for the new one, but this was a really good one, taking place in clearly a very different time period from what the Yakuza / Like a Dragon games are known for. It uses a bunch of character models from those games in here to retell a story, a historical story about a man named Sakamoto Ryoma, and it's great. I love the story to this game. It's intriguing, it's different, it is a slow burn, and it does have a very slow pace to it, but I think it's incredibly rewarding, and I really wanted to see what would happen. And then when it comes to gameplay, it is that typical Yakuza gameplay that you know and love. You're dropped into an open world and are told to just kind of go do whatever you want. You can go do the main story, you can get in a ton of fights with people, or you can go do all the goofy stuff on the side. The time period really allows them to do different things that you wouldn't see in other Like a Dragon games. Don't worry, karaoke's still here, and there's a bunch of side stories to do here just like the other games, and the sub stories were actually really different and interesting in this game. I like the open world. You do go back and forth a lot, and it's not the biggest, but I like how many secrets and just how dense everything is. This open world felt very realized and very dense, and I can appreciate that. I don't need every open world to be absolutely massive. Something tight like this, it's good for me. When it comes to the combat, it is in real time, and I think it's great. It's very smooth. There's 4 different styles. I won't lie, some are clearly better than others. I love the style with the sword and the gun, and I just thought it was a ton of fun here. It's really satisfying. There's some good heat moves, and the game puts up a good challenge. I know plenty of people think the game is super grindy, and I'll admit, you do actually have to do side missions. You do have to do the crafting. Otherwise, you're just going to get your ass whooped. This game is not messing around, and there's a ton to do here. There's a ton to craft, and you can actually get hella raw. The game is probably longer than you think it is, and at times, sure, it can feel like a grind, and the pacing might not be amazing, but I thought it was rewarding. I like the combat. I like the payoff for doing some of the side content, learning the new moves, and upgrading your weapons. It felt really rewarding, and I just really enjoyed my time with this one. It's obviously very different from the main series, but I still very much enjoyed it and have no problem recommending it to fans of the series. So for number 9, we have Super Mario Wonder, the latest 2D Mario game after a very long drought. And man, this game is great. It is one of the best 2D platformers of the last 10 years, easy. I love 2D Mario, whether it's Super Mario Bros. 3, Mario World, or even some of the new Super games, but this game, it really might take the cake as the best 2D Mario game of them all. First off, I'm gonna just say visually, the game is striking. It looks amazing, it's beautiful, there's not another game that looks like it. I love the visuals, the soundtrack is amazing, and then the controls, the feel, oh, this is maybe the best Mario and pals have ever controlled. The controls are so good, everything's so tight and responsive, it's great stuff. But what really sells Mario Wonder as a fantastic game is the moment-to-moment gameplay and the level design. The gameplay is that typical 2D Mario gameplay you know and love that's tried and true for 30 plus years now. It's great, but the level design goes off the walls here. The level design is some of the most creative, imaginative, straight up innovative level design you've seen for any 2D platformer, and this game just goes nuts. Every single level is different from the last with a different gimmick, different idea, and it never gets old. You never know what you're going to expect. It keeps you guessing, it keeps things fresh, engaging, you name it. It's just a ton of fun. I love how none of the levels really are the same here. There's so many different ideas. Seriously, there's just so many different ideas, especially when you get the seeds. And then the game isn't super straightforward and linear either. You do actually have to get these seeds to progress. The game even does get challenging towards the end. There's plenty of secrets, plenty of secret levels, secret areas. You can play the entire game co-op. Like, this game's a pretty easy sell. If you like Mario, if you like 2D games, if you like platformers, you probably already have this game on your radar. Otherwise, I think it's worth putting on the radar. It's a fantastic game, and I'm kind of surprised that it's number 9 on the list. I thought it'd be higher, but seriously, 2023 was just that good. I'm sure this will ruffle some feathers and upset at least a few people, but we have Final Fantasy 16 in the number 8 spot. Better than Mario Wonder, really? I really enjoyed Final Fantasy 16, you know? While the game does clearly have a few flaws and it isn't exactly the RPG a lot of people hoped it would be, I love this game. I could not put this game down once I started playing it. Like, I really just almost only played this game because of how invested and intrigued I was by it. While I know not everybody is a fan of Clive and his story, I was thoroughly, and I mean thoroughly, invested from start all the way to the end, no matter how slow or different things might have been. While I agree the pacing isn't amazing for the story, especially in the second half, I still stuck with it and very much enjoyed it. I love the characters of this game. Seriously, the characters were awesome. I really did enjoy the characters, especially Clive. My man Clive, he was great. He's one of my favorite protagonists of any game all year. Excellent voice acting. Ben Starr, great voice acting for Clive. And I just loved his story, man. He's flawed, he goes through a lot of shit, but he gets a lot of wisdom. You see him grow up and get old. Like, I really enjoyed the story here. I know it's, again, not for everybody, but the story was just beautiful in my opinion. and it really kept me going. The gameplay, at least in my opinion, is good also. I will be the first to admit when it comes to RPG elements, it isn't the strongest. It's very basic in the RPG aspects, but instead what we have is an action hack and slash, and while it's not the most complex hack and slash either, I still enjoyed it for what it was. I thought the combat had a little bit of depth and it was satisfying. And sure, at times it does get a little old and it does go on too long, but before you know it, you'll be at one of those boss fights that just absolutely kicks ass. The boss fights go so hard in this game. The boss fights are fantastic. I love the boss fights. These are some of the best boss fights of any Final Fantasy, shit, any video game. The boss fights are legendarily good. Just incredibly cinematic spectacles you won't be forgetting anytime soon, and I loved it. I really did. When it comes to everything outside of the combat, it might not be the best. The open world doesn't exist. There is no open world. The areas themselves are decently designed. All the side quests are pretty basic outside of a few that actually have a bunch of story significance. At least the game's nice enough to tell you which side quests to do. Overall, I really enjoyed my experience with this game. I thought it had a beautiful story. The game was visually stunning. The music is nothing short of phenomenal, and while the game does have some flaws, it isn't the best hack and slash or RPG. I think the way everything comes together was just great. I'm sure I've angered plenty of people and they've already let me know down below about my opinion, but again, this is my list. This is just what I feel. This was one of my favorite games all year. Man, Clive was so good, man. He was so good. Anyway, let's move on before I piss off the rest of the community. So for number 7, we have Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Now, I've shilled it plenty of times. Y'all are making fun of me at this point about it, but yes, I was involved in this game's production. It was what I worked on for the last year before I got laid off from Insomniac, so I'm sure there is a bit of a bias here, but Marvel's Spider-Man 2 really is one of the best superhero games ever made. While it certainly isn't the most innovative and is probably one of the most play-it-safe sequels you could find nowadays, I still really did enjoy what this game has to offer. It really is an improvement on the original Marvel Spider-Man and still tells a very good story about Peter and Miles, and I really like the direction they take with this. There's some really good villains in here as well, and the story, it's different from other Spider-Man stories, and I enjoyed it for what it was. When it comes to the gameplay, it's incredibly similar to the first games. The movement is better. The movement is incredible in this game, whether you're web slinging or you're gliding around. It feels great, and you'll never want to fast travel anywhere, which really is the point of a Spider-Man game. And when you're in the open world, you can do either the main missions, you can stop some crime, you can help some people, or get one of the many collectibles. I think the combat is the best combat of any Spider-Man game, and while it does feel, again, a little deja vu, it does feel incredibly refined, and it's just super smooth, and I have nothing but a ton of praise for the combat. There's actually depth here, and yeah, it's good. When it comes to the open world, sure, parts of it are the same since it's New York. I don't know how you're going to change that, but I really enjoy the open world. It feels lived in and alive. There's actually hustle and bustle. There's a lot going on here, and there's plenty to do. The game looks great, it runs great, and I really just don't have any glaring issues about it. I mean, if you didn't like the other Spider-Man games, you're not going to like this one, but if you had any interest in the other ones, you're going to enjoy this game. Look, I'm not too happy with Insomniac right now, but even I can put that aside to see this game's quality and just how good it is. I have no problem recommending it to people who like Spider-Man at all or have played the first game and enjoyed it, because it's more the same and you're gonna like it. But aw yeah, here we have Bomb Rush Cyberpunk in the number 6 spot. Yes, I really did actually love this game that much. I've got it this high on the list. Bomb Rush Cyberpunk is one of my favorite games all year. Hell, one of my favorite games ever. I have tried my best to hype this game up for months now, and I'm gonna do it again. Now, I love Jet Set Radio, especially Future, one of my favorite games of all time, so when I saw this game, I immediately perked up, and I can't believe I'm saying this again, but this game is even better than Jet Set Radio was. Like, it is so good. They really took everything I loved about Jet Set Radio and brought it into the modern era, updating the controls, the combat, the feel. It's great. Like, it just totally gets the assignment, and it really is just a phenomenal experience. The game looks amazing. I love the aesthetic. It looks just like Jet Set, and it looks so good. I love the aesthetic, the vibe, the feel, whatever you want to call it. This game totally nails it. The controls are great. The game just feels exceptional to play. It's super smooth, easy to pick up. You're going to need a little practice if you want to get real raw at this game. The game will actually throw some platforming challenges at you. If you couldn't tell, this game is primarily a platformer where you're also tagging things like Jet Set Radio, and not only are the controls super smooth, but the level design is great, how everything feels like, it's just so fun. I really can't describe it. You can do tricks in this game as well, and the trick system isn't the most complex, but it's more than what we had in Jet Set. You'll occasionally get into combat, and the combat, yeah, it's better than Jet Set's. It's not amazing, but it's passable. What I like is you can actually choose between different types of transportation. You can be on skates, you can be on a bike, shoot, you can even just free run if you want, which I thought was pretty cool. Like, this game, again, it just feels so nice to play. The story itself, it's nothing all that special, but I still liked where it went, and I thought there was a couple good twists in here. And while I won't lie, the gangs themselves, the rivals, aren't the most exciting or memorable, especially compared to Jet Set. They're still decent enough. One area this game had to absolutely nail, though, was the soundtrack. Jet Set has a legendary soundtrack in this game. Oh, it's so good. The soundtrack, licensed or not, it's so good in this game. Is it better than Jet Set's? I don't know, but the soundtrack is really great, and this game, it just gets it. It totally gets it, and it knows what everybody wanted. And Sega has since announced a Jet Set game, so good luck being better than this game. Good luck. I've said it plenty of times, but Bomb Rush Cyberpunk for me is a 10 out of 10, my highest recommendation. I have no problem recommending the game to anybody that can breathe air. Ooh, here we are at the top 5. We're finally in the top 5 with number 5, Street Fighter 6. Now, Street Fighter 6 had a lot to live up to, especially with the lackluster launch of Street Fighter 5, and this game, oh, it totally kills it. This game really is, no hyperbole, one of the greatest fighting games ever made, and immediately one of my favorite fighting games of them all. This game, it really improves on previous Street Fighter games in so many aspects. It really does feel like Capcom brought not only their A game, their like A++ game to create just one of the best fighting games in such a fun time. Like, I've already put a ton of time into this game, and I'm sure I'll be putting time into Street Fighter 6 for years and years to come. I am ready to see the longevity on this game, because based off of at least the first 6 months, this game totally deserves it. It is not only an incredibly accessible fighting game, but there is so much depth here. The character roster is really great for a first release. We've got a ton of classics, a couple new ones. I really don't have any issues with it. I think it's great. A bunch of the characters have new redesigns I actually really enjoy. In fact, graphically, I'll just say this game is great. It looks great, and I really like the visual style. Looks so much better than SF5. Oh, and the music also really slaps. The music is great in this game. But when it comes to the fighting, the moment-to-moment gameplay, this is phenomenal. It feels so tight. It feels really nice. It's also incredibly accessible for people who have never even really played a fighting game. It's very user-friendly, but there is so much depth for people who have been playing these games for years and years. You can learn so much. There's a couple new mechanics here that I actually really can appreciate. It feels like there's nods to older games while also doing a little bit of something new, and it feels so nice, man. Like, the fighting game community has needed a game like this forever. Like, to just let not only new people come in, but vets as well. And I'm not going to act like I know professional fighting games all that well, but I can see quality. And this game has it in spades, not only with the fighting itself, but the content as well, with a full-on single-player mode that's actually really fun, that's 10 plus hours long. I enjoyed the single player. I enjoyed creating my own character and going through the story with it. The online is great. I like the lobby system. You can play other Street Fighter games. Like, this game is the complete package. It is what every fighting game legit should try to be like. This game sets an incredibly high standard for fighting games, and all I gotta say is if you're someone who likes fighting games, maybe not even Street Fighter, just fighting games in general, oh, this is a must play. I don't think fighting games really just get much better than this. Like, it's so good. And in the number 4 spot, we have Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Look, I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing people hype this game up, and here I am to basically do the same thing, so I'll try to keep it a little brief. Breath of the Wild, excellent game. We all love it. Everyone's played it to death. Tears of the Kingdom looks at Breath of the Wild and says, how do we make that way better? And somehow they did. They absolutely did, and have created maybe the greatest Zelda game of them all. And that is saying not just a little, but a lot. Like, honestly, 100% here. The game is just better than Breath of the Wild in basically every single aspect. Sure, graphically, it's not that much better, but in every other aspect, it's better. The story's better, taking place after. The general gameplay's better. The weapons are better. The world is better. The puzzles are better. Your abilities are better. The world is way more expansive. There's a lot more secrets. There's a lot more to it. Like, seriously, you could spend 200 hours in this world and you'll still be finding plenty of new things. Like, it feels almost endless, but it's actually very well designed. I love the open world and just how you have so much freedom. The freedom is even better because there's more to do here. And I mentioned for a second that the story is better. The story is actually a lot better. The story in Breath of the Wild, I never thought was any good, honestly. It was basically non-existent. Here, there's like a full-on story with Ganondorf. I love the story, and the moment when you get the Master Sword is one of the most epic moments of any video game. It's so good. It is so good. At this point, I really don't know what else there is to say about Tears of the Kingdom that hasn't already been said. If you like Zelda, if you like open world games, if you have a Switch, this really is just a must play. It is an absolute must play, 10 out of 10, and it would have very easily smoked every other game coming out in that year, but it had to come out in 2023, one of the most epic years ever in gaming, and it's not even in my top 3. Oh. But speaking of my top 3, we have number 3, Pikmin 4. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of people going, really? You have Pikmin 4 above Tears of the Kingdom? Yes, I do. If this list hasn't already made you scratch your head a few times, hopefully by now it has, and you can let me know down below what you're thinking. But Pikmin 4, this game went so hard. I love Pikmin, especially the first 2, and this game, it feels like it was made for me, and maybe Arlo. Like, seriously, it goes so hard in every single aspect, with an interesting story, great presentation, and then just refined Pikmin gameplay. Like, this is the best Pikmin gameplay by a landslide. There's a ton of puzzles, there's a ton of content. Like, it felt like this game was never going to end, and I never wanted it to end. I was having so much fun with it. The game sees your customizable character going to go save some other characters, and I'll just leave it at that. I actually really enjoyed the story. I like where it goes, and there's a bit more than it seems. You also get accompanied by this new dog, which is not only a great character, but he's also a gameplay mechanic as well, and the gameplay, it's like they just somehow found a way to make Pikmin 2's gameplay even better. Now, Pikmin 3, don't get me wrong, it was a good game, but I felt like it kind of sent the series back. It made it regress a little. Pikmin 4 actually truly evolves the series and pushes it forward and adds a bunch of modern sensibilities and just a ton of amazing quality of life improvements. Like, this is the most accessible Pikmin game by a landslide. It's very user-friendly. The game controls great. It's super smooth, easy to understand. The interface is really great. I love how the game is just so, like, accommodating and just understands what people are doing with Pikmin. Like, for instance, the best example I can give is if something needs 5 Pikmin to move it, if you press A 5 times or whatever your throw Pikmin button is, you'll automatically stop throwing Pikmin because you don't need any more for that. It's stuff like that where the quality of life improvements are so good, especially to longtime fans like me. And then the open worlds you go to, I love these areas. They're so well designed. They're all very different from each other. There's a bunch of throwbacks to other Pikmin games, but there's new stuff here as well. On top of that, there's a couple new Pikmin types, there's a bunch of new boss fights, there's a whole new battle style mode that's actually really fun, and I just have a ton to talk about this game, and I'm running out of breath and time. So I'll just say the game looks phenomenal, it plays phenomenal, and people who like Pikmin need to pick this game up ASAP because it's really that good. One of the best Switch games ever made in my opinion, and it's right here. What a great game. And here we are in the top 2. It was really hard to decide, but my number 2 is the Resident Evil 4 remake. Now, the original Resident Evil 4, it's one of my favorite games of all time. I love that game to death. It's just phenomenal in so many different aspects, and here's this remake that is somehow even better. I've heard some people say that they prefer the original, but I'm just kind of scratching my head because in my opinion, this game is a little bit better than the original. Obviously, presentation-wise, this game looks stupid good. It runs incredibly well. The voice acting is great. The presentation is just off the chain. It's really great. But when it comes to the gameplay, this game feels so good. This is the best gameplay of Resident Evil, in my opinion. Really, not just Resident Evil. This is some of the best gameplay you could get from any video game, period. Like, it is so good. It is such a solid, amazing beast of a game that feels like it just had not only a lot going on for a game in the mid-2000s, but even nowadays it feels like it has a lot going on. Like, these combat encounters are some of the best combat encounters you will find in any video game, and it's gotten even better than the original. First off, Leon can actually be stealthy here, which is pretty cool. The way the knife works is also totally different. You can parry. I love parrying in this game. And then the gunplay. The gunplay is phenomenal. I have nothing else really to say about it. It's smooth, it feels amazing, it's satisfying, it sounds great. The gunplay is everything you would want from a video game. It is that good. There's a bunch of different enemies. It's all super satisfying to blow their head off or do a German suplex or any of Leon's new moves. Like, Leon is a total badass here. He's great to control. He's super fun to control. The level design is excellent. You'll find yourself exploring around. There's plenty of side things to do. There's even more than there was in the original, and I just had so much fun with this game. It was one of those games, like plenty of other games I've said, I couldn't put it down once I started playing it. This is all I wanted to play. This was low-key all I thought about was just, when can I get back to Resident Evil 4? Because it was that good. There have been some changes, you know, a few areas are a little different. Some boss fights have been taken out, a few have been added. Most of the quick time, like 95% of the quick time events are gone, and instead we have a few boss fights. I actually really like these boss fights, and they utilize the knife mechanic really well, and I think all the changes were for the better. The game is a very different tone and setting and atmosphere from the original. It's not as goofy and campy. And while part of me is a little sad Leon's not out here saying no way bro or anything like that, I can also really appreciate the new atmosphere and tone they're going for. I think it's really great, and I think it's different from the original. It doesn't make the original bad or anything like that. It's just different, and what we have I think is very good. Resident Evil 4 Remake, it's nothing short of phenomenal. It's really easy to see why this could be someone's best game of the year or their favorite game of the year. It's hard for me to say anything else, but I also kind of don't want a remake to be my favorite game of the year. I don't know if that makes any sense. That's just a personal bias, but anyway, Resident Evil 4, it is what it is. And my top game of 2023 is unsurprisingly Baldur's Gate 3. I've talked about this game several times. I've said that it's my favorite game of the year several times. Look, it's everybody's favorite game of the year, it feels like, and I'm not going to waste anyone's time. I'm going to be real brief about this. Baldur's Gate 3 really is one of the greatest games ever made, in my opinion. It is the best D&D game. It is maybe the best turn-based game ever made. Seriously, it is that good. It has phenomenal characters, writing, it has a great turn-based battle system. There are endless choices. It feels like your background really matters. The game is long. It has a great pace to it. There's a bunch of lovable characters, some of the best companions you'll ever find in a video game. The entire game can be played cooperatively. I thoroughly enjoyed this game from start to finish. I actually really did enjoy Act 3. I know some people didn't, but I loved Act 3. I like how the game ends. I don't think it shits the bed. I didn't have too many issues bug-wise or stability-wise. I'm sure it's even better now. They keep constantly updating it. They're adding more stuff. It's crazy replayable. I put just way too much time into this game this year. Like, I didn't conquer my backlog as much as I thought I would because I was playing Baldur's Gate 3 so much. The game is that good. I have nothing but the highest praise for Baldur's Gate 3. I think everybody does, and if you don't like turn-based games or don't want to give this game a shot because it's fantasy or it's slower or quote boring or whatever, well, that's on you. You're really missing out on one of the greatest games ever made. But that is it. That is absolutely it. We are done. We are finally done with this video. It has been going on a long time. I've been editing it a long time. So if you made it to this part of the video, comment sharks, as in what my profile picture is. I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. So hope everyone has a wonderful New Year, wonderful Christmas, wonderful 4th of July, whatever the nearest holiday is. I hope you have a wonderful day, night. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you so much. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. We got the Patreon and super thanks. I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye.